When I say France, what do you picture? Is it a heroic scene from the Napoleonic Wars? Maybe you imagine sitting at a cafe on the streets of Paris. Or perhaps you see cheese-eating surrender monkeys who didn't help us invade Iraq when they should have because we're America and they should do what we tell them. Regardless of what you think, it's impossible to deny that France has had a major impact on world history and culture, leaving us with a complex legacy to view from many different perspectives. These many different views we have are shaped by our own cultural and political views today. So for this video then, I'm going to try my best to keep this video unbiased about the events that we're going to cover. A nation with a long history that has played a major part in shaping the world that we know today. From important inventions such as the Etch-a-Sketch to some battles I guess, and so much more, it spurs the question, what if France never existed? How would this alternate world look? Well, before I can explain this scenario, we need to explore the historical context of what we call France today. If you want to skip straight to the alternate history scenario, click the character in the top right corner. Just kidding, viewer. No matter how hard you click, that doesn't work, and it hasn't worked since 2015. I can't go into specific detail about the entire history of France for the simple reason that there would be too much to talk about, and unfortunately, if it looks like I'm oversimplifying, it's because I have to. If you're here to learn about a detailed history of France, I've left some resources in the description for you. The first place to start when tracing the origins of what we call France is after the fall of the Western Roman Empire during what we historians call the Dark Ages, when a Germanic people known as the Franks moved in to sweep up what remained of Roman land in the former province of Gaul. This Germanic people would go on to form a kingdom of the Franks that would thrive during these harsh times, the most notable king of the Franks being of course Charlemagne, who reigned for a truly impressive 46 years, and whose influence on the history of Europe is so large he deserves a video of his own. But to quickly simplify, Charles would unify much of Western Europe, be named the first Holy Roman Emperor, spread Christianity to much of the population that was still pagan, especially in Germany, usher in a renaissance of learning before it was cool, and would appropriately be named the Father of Europe for his role in shaping and setting the foundations for the medieval world. However, after the passing of a couple generations due to Frankish inheritance laws, his domain would go on to be split into many different realms of his descendants. It's here that we see the first political entity that we can roughly trace back to being the precursor to modern-day France. And that is with the emergence of West Francia under Charles the Bald at the Treaty of Verdun in 843, which split the old Carolingian Empire into three. This land of the Franks would be undergoing a transition throughout the Middle Ages, culminating in the year 1190 when Philip II would become the first king of the Franks to style and present himself as also being the king of France. France would go on to make its mark on world history, forever changing the politics of Europe, fighting wars, creating a colonial empire abroad, as well as being a major population center in Western Europe. It's also this kingdom that, after about a century of taking financial and military L's, would execute its own king during the French Revolution and seriously threaten the very institutions of power and monarchy in Europe, shaking the entire continent and unleashing ideas of nationalism and popular revolution throughout the world that would change everything we know about history. After the revolution, France still remained a big player and would help lead the world in industrialization and neo-imperialism. It won a bloody First World War alongside the Allies, did a little bit too much trolling at the Treaty of Versailles, went AFK during the outbreak of World War II, and remained a part of the Western Bloc during the Cold War. Except for when it threw a temper tantrum and left the military structure in NATO, but they came back, and that leaves us at the modern day, with the state of France still a part of NATO, the EU, and a leader in the Western world. Now that we're all caught up about France, you can go ahead and forget about the past 3 minutes because it's time to actually start the video. What if France did not exist? What would be the effects of such a drastic change happening in our timeline? How do we even begin to form a scenario like this? Well, viewer, if you would stop interrupting me, here's one scenario of many that could have happened. And if you notice a change in editing, it's actually because I've reached level 2 of my alternate history hub progression. For the sake of this video and for this alternate history scenario to work, we're gonna have to assume some things about our timeline. Because, Jimmy, if we actually take out the entire country of France, everything butterflies so far into so many different timelines, it becomes impossible to predict what could happen. This is not simply a changed historical event, this is alternate geography. And because geography plays such an important role in shaping history, we have to start from the beginning. With that said, our timeline begins with the Indo-European migrations into Western Europe. In our timeline, these Indo-Europeans and their silly little horses spread through the continent and shaped the peoples and groups and languages of Europe. But where there was once land that made up modern-day France, there is nothing but water. A vast new connection between the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. This expanse of water limits the ability of Indo-Europeans from settling in Iberia. They would still likely reach the British Isles, but seeing this huge mass of water would deter significant expansion into the new island of Iberia. By around 200 BC, the Celts, being one of the most important and influential Indo-European peoples, would still exist, but instead of making Gaul their home, we would see the Celtic population remain strong in Central Europe, the British Isles, and the lowlands. These Celtic populations would make trading and fishing settlements along the coastline of this new sea, which would go on to become a hub of Celtic influence. While it's also impossible to predict what the name of this sea would be, we can always guess, and since much of the activity in this region will be attributed to those Celtic populations, we'll go with the Latinized Mare Celtae. And I choose Latin in particular because yes, the Romans are still going to have a massive impact on this timeline, but we'll get to them later. Another side effect of having no France is a reduced Germanic presence in Europe. This is because, in real life, Germanic tribes expanded their presence into Central Europe and pushed out the Celts, who in our world shifted their presence to areas like modern-day France. But if you remove France from the equation, well, now the Celts have less places to go, and in this timeline are more likely to defend their holdings instead of simply migrating. Instead, they fight tooth and nail to defend their holdings, and while it's still likely they would lose some ground to the Germanic population, who would have a strong presence along the German coast, the Celtic people would find themselves moving around Europe much less, and would instead be more concentrated in these regions in northwestern Europe. This also leaves us with a population in Iberia that's now been cut off from the rest of Europe, and by 200 BC, it's a hotspot of influence from many different cultures and peoples, just as it was in our timeline. But in our alternate world, the indigenous ancestors of the modern Basque people have a much stronger hold over the island, and are able to spread their language and population across the northern part of Iberia, especially in Galicia, where in our real timeline the Celts settled. Instead, we see an expansion of the Basque culture and people who thrive in the north. The rest of Iberia would likely be a mix of the indigenous Iberian populations and tribes. In our timeline, these people's language and culture were Latinized and made extinct by the Romans.
Get him up, let him get up, let him get up, let him get up.
But instead, we would see the survival of a unique Iberian culture that would be blended with influence from the Punic Carthaginians, who would create trading cities and exert influence through commerce and intermingling with the population. It's possible that in this Iberia, there would be tension between the more northern, isolated Basque peoples and the southern Iberians who take after Carthage more than they do their own Iberian identity. And now, yes, the moment you've all been waiting for is finally here. It's time to talk about the Romans and the Carthaginians. With no Gaul for Julius Caesar to conquer, no Gaul for Hannibal to march across and traverse the Alps, the dynamic between these two Mediterranean superpowers is forever changed. Jimmy, what are you doing? You're interrupting my scenario. What do you mean the scenario is boring? I haven't even gotten to the Basque colonial empire yet. Jimmy, you put that down. This video is not about Germany or World War I. This video is about France.
Johnny, get your gun, get your gun, get your gun. Take it on the run, on the run, on the run. Hear them calling you and me every time.
I guess this video is about the German Empire winning World War I now, since that's all you degenerates really care about anyways. I thought my other scenario was interesting, but alright, whatever. Look, here's the scenario. It's 1914, France is still underwater, and Germany invents the Stormtrooper Snorkel Schlieffen divisions, and they do the Schlieffen Plan. Alright Jimmy, is that what you wanted? Can I go back to making scenarios that I like? Wait, where are you going? You really just wanted me to talk about Germany winning World War I and then you leave? What about all the world building that I was doing? I haven't even gotten to Harry Turtledove's book about what if banana aliens invaded England and nuked the world. Oh god, I should really just make another channel where I talk about Transformers or something. Oh yeah, before we go, my book, The Uzbek Articles, where in my alternate scenario, the Aral Sea is drained for a massive irrigation project. And guess what, viewer? Germany wins World War II in this timeline instead of winning World War I. Because that's what you're here for, right? You're gonna buy it now. Just in case you didn't hear me the first time, Germany also wins World War II. Okay. You should totally join my Discord server. It's really bad. To be honest with you, it is really bad. But sometimes someone posts something funny. And also we're going to stream some Paradox multiplayer games over the winter, so that'd be cool. Yeah.